The junior senator from Texas comes up short for president.
Together, we left it all on the field in Indiana.
What happens next in this 2016 race? Our roundtable weighs in. Patrick Svitek from the Texas Tribune and Heather Wilhelm from Real Clear Politics. Plus, one death is too many, but Texas children keep dying from neglect and abuse. After another high-profile case, does this problem go beyond the state's ability? Also, your safety under sedation. We take a look at state oversight of dentists in a KXAN investigation. It's all today on State of Texas In Depth. Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. For the first time in 13 months, there are no Texans in the race for president. What a difference a matter of days can make. We'll dive deeper into the national campaigns a little later, but first, tragedy closer to home highlights a major problem. This week, Sunny Slade Bort became one of the latest children in Texas to die of abuse or neglect. Doctors took the one-year-old off life support days after medics found her nearly dead in her parents' home in Blanco. Sunny's mother, Jamie Petronella, and her boyfriend, John Lawrence, each faced charges in the little girl's death. We know Child Protective Services had been involved with Petronella's children several times in the last few years. After the death, the agency took 2 other children from the home. Police said one of the children may have been sexually abused too. Unfortunately, Sunny's case is not isolated. Statewide, 171 children died from abuse and neglect in Texas in 2015. That's 3 children killed every week. Looking closer at the counties in and around Austin, 16 children died from abuse and neglect that year. There have been some changes in recent years, though. Since 2014, the Office of Child Safety began investigating every child death in the state. Everything from drownings or medical issues to serious abuse. We hate to repeat ourselves, but these deaths are a big and complex issue. Last weekend, we aired Robert Maxwell's interview with the Department of Family and Protective Services Commissioner, John Spicia. Spicia will retire at the end of this month. You'll want to watch the full interview. It's in the politics section of KXAN.com. Back at the state capitol, the Rotunda received one new painting this week. Former Governor Rick Perry's face will now greet every lawmaker and visitor. The ex-governor was there and faced reporter questions about his endorsement of Donald Trump for president. KXAN's Phil Prazen reports.
Former Governor Perry faced the Texas press to say he'd entertain being vice president with Donald Trump at the top of the ticket.
I will entertain helping my country. I don't have any idea what that may entail. If Donald Trump says, Perry, let's talk about you helping in this role, I'm open to it.
Remember, just a few months ago, Governor Perry was one of Trump's harshest critics.
I don't think he has the character or the temperament to hold the highest position in this country.
Times have changed.
He knows how to market. He knows how to brand. And he's vanquished 16 pretty capable men and women. 2012, I probably said some harsh things about Mitt Romney. He said some harsh things about me. We are competitors.
Now he joins the chorus of GOP leaders who now say Trump is their man as the general election kicks in. No longer Republican versus Republican, but Republican versus Democrat.
When the choice is Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, that becomes abundantly easy for me to make that decision.
Phil Prazen, KXAN News.
For a closer look at Perry's legacy and what it means heading into 2016, I'm joined by our roundtable, Heather Wilhelm from Real Clear Politics and Patrick Svitek from our media partner, the Texas Tribune. Welcome, guys. Thanks for being with us. So Perry's portrait is out there, you know, and now there's talk about him maybe not turning down a vice presidential possibility, right? What do you think about that, Patrick?
Well, he's certainly open to it. If you saw the interview he did with CNN on Thursday where he effectively endorsed Donald Trump, he said that he would certainly consider that if it were offered to him. He spoke with reporters after the portrait unveiling today, and he said that he again said that he would not rule out being Trump's running mate or eventually his vice president. So clearly he's keeping that option open. I don't know how realistic of an option it is, but he's not ruling it out.
Yeah, how realistic is something like that?
Well, you know, I got to say, I've been following politics too long to be disappointed, but I was pretty shocked to see Rick Perry jump on the Trump bandwagon so quickly, and I would be genuinely surprised if he went as far as the VP route. But hey, stranger things have happened this year, right?
Yeah, and he's had quite a year. I mean, from the presidential race to everything with his indictment being dropped, and now this. I mean, what's next, right?
He's a busy guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think that Trump would actually consider him as a realistic possibility for a running mate?
You know, the one criteria that I've consistently heard Trump lay out is that he wants a political insider to be his running mate. Now, you know, some people would consider Rick Perry to maybe fit that bill. I mean, he's had a lot of experience in government. And in fact, today, as he was talking up the possibility, Perry, you know, not so subtly mentioned, you know, well, I've been involved in, you know, I've had this executive experience for 14 years, been involved in state government for decades. So maybe under that criteria, that sole criteria, Perry fits the bill. But right now, I think we're still trying to learn a little more about what Trump is looking for, who's on the short list, how that process is going to play out. There's been a lot of talk in the past few days about it, and some, I don't know how likely Perry is at this point.
Yeah, because people keep saying it's, you know, maybe Trump doesn't have that great leadership quality that we need for a president, but it's the people he puts around him that are really going to make a difference.
I've noticed the trend with Donald Trump seems to be, he tends to like to surround himself with yes men, and I have a hard time seeing Rick Perry fitting that mold. It seems like Donald Trump's going to want somebody who's on Team Trump all the way, all the time, and I just have a hard time visualizing that.
When you talk about states that Donald Trump really needs to do well in, because maybe it wasn't something that he won in the primary, you know, Texas is one of those that he needs some support in, right?
Sure. I mean, I don't know. I think it's still very unlikely, regardless of who's on the ticket, that Texas would, you know, that go in that direction, or that it would really help him have a huge boost. But yeah, it couldn't hurt.
What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. You know, Ben Carson came out and said, look, we're casting a really wide net for this VP search, and he said they might even, you know, choose a Democrat. So I think this is going to be a complete wild card who gets chosen, but, you know, I'm sure there's some method to the madness.
Trump walked that back today, by the way. You may be shocked to hear that.
And I am shocked to hear that. Wow. Well,
yeah, he said that they ruled out picking a Democrat.
Oh, well, that was fast.
Yeah. Exactly.
Very quick.
Yeah.
Our roundtable returns in just a few minutes. The path is more or less set heading into November, so what happens next now that Donald Trump is carrying the Republican banner? Patients under sedation dying in doctors' and dentists' office in Texas. How state lawmakers could soon step in, a KXAN investigation coming up on State of Texas in depth. Ted Cruz's time in the national spotlight is over for now, and essentially the ballots are set. Donald Trump on the Republican side and Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side. Even though Bernie Sanders says he'll still stay in the race until the last primary next month. That's why we have our expert roundtable, Patrick Svitek from our media partner, the Texas Tribune, and Heather Wilhelm from Real Clear Politics. Thanks again for joining us. Hello. So when Ted Cruz got out, I know you were following his campaign out on the trail. I mean, were you a little bit surprised that it happened as quickly as it did?
Sure, it definitely seemed abrupt to some of us who thought that he would fight it out all the way till California, to the last day of primaries. I mean, for a while he had vowed to stay in the race as long as there was a viable path to victory. And to many, that seemed to be, you know, him vowing to stay in the race until Donald Trump hit that threshold of 1,237 delegates. And so it was a surprise, certainly in that context.
What was the mindset there? I mean, why do you think that he chose that moment and not waiting a little bit longer?
I think it must have been just the fact that Trump completely demolished him in Indiana, right? I think the numbers were probably bigger than he thought. And what's been interesting is sort of seeing the dominoes fall since then, right? Cruz drops out, then Kasich, and now this week we've seen one after another, a major Republican figure endorse Donald Trump, which is fascinating.
Are we going to see Ted Cruz pop back up again sometime before November? I mean,
he's reportedly scheduled to return to the Senate next week, I believe as early as Monday. I'm sure he'll be asked about the presidential race in Washington. He can't escape the topic forever. So I don't know quite yet, you know, what his plans are as far as Trump is concerned. But certainly the race got very nasty and personal between them. The wives are brought into it. The father was brought into it at the end there. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Cruz does come around, if it takes quite some time for that to happen.
Yeah, but I doubt they're going to be friends, even though Donald Trump was like, you know, he was a great competitor. He was
tough and smart.
But the convention, is that going to go smoothly, or do you think we'll see some of these old faces come back into the, you know, the mix?
I don't think there's any way that the convention is going to be business as usual. You know, I think Ted Cruz has got to be planning for 2020 at this point. Whether or not he'll decide going to the convention is in his best interest, with that plan in mind, we'll see. But there's going to be something unusual happening at the convention, even if Donald Trump soundly secures those 1,237.
You know, historically, has Ted Cruz, You know, is he in that position to really set himself up for success in 2020?
I think so. I guess it'll depend to what the GOP looks like in 2020 or in the coming years. Will it become Trump's GOP? Will he go on and lose to Hillary Clinton in the general election? Will Cruz be able to come out and say, I told you so, we shouldn't have gone with Trump? I think his viability in 2020 depends a lot on what happens between now and November.
And kind of how he is in the Senate as well.
Sure, of course, yeah. I mean, that's certainly going to be a tough return from him, for him. I mean, obviously the schism between him and his colleagues was already deep. His presidential campaign deep in that schism, as we saw in the end. I mean, even as he was the only alternative, essentially, to Donald Trump, a lot of his Senate colleagues would not go anywhere near him or offer any kind of level of formal support. And so it's going to be fascinating to see play out.
And, you know, I think, you know, I said on Twitter earlier today, you know, Ted Cruz thought he was playing six-dimensional chess in this election, and it turns out it was just basically caveman dodgeball, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so I think he really damaged himself by coming out and saying Donald Trump is terrific. It seems like people have shorter and shorter memories these days. You know, like Donald Trump saying Ted Cruz a great guy just days after eviscerating him on national media. So I think Ted Cruz, though, has seriously compromised himself by going out and toting Donald Trump's line, and then in the last days of the campaign basically saying he's going to be the end of the republic.
Yeah, as one Republican explained it to me, back in the fall, you know, as far as how Cruz approached Trump, it's one thing to avoid attacking Trump, but to avoid attacking him and also effusively praise him, you know, host a rally with him and just heap praise on him time and time again. That's a whole different dynamic, and it raises questions about authenticity for Cruz when he finally does pivot to attacking Trump.
So that makes me think that he's probably not going to be a running mate possibility.
Yeah. I don't think he's on the short list for Trump at this point.
You know, we did talk about Rick Perry earlier, but what other faces could you see as possible running mates for Trump?
You know, it's fascinating, as you can see this on social media, is Donald Trump, and I believe, you know, people around his campaign have said that he's going to actively try to court Bernie Sanders voters, which is fascinating, you know. So I think he's going to go for somebody who's not your stereotypical right-wing, hardline conservative. I think it's going to be somebody from a broader ideological spectrum, because I think he's going to try. He understands that the rules, he's completely upended them. Why not try to expand the party, as he's frequently, you know, boasted of doing?
I think the possibilities are endless for Trump when it comes to his VP.
Yeah.
Do you think that Bernie Sanders voters would realistically do that? I mean, what's going to happen with them related to Hillary?
I do have a hard time believing that Bernie Sanders voters would flock to Trump. But I do think he's really going to flip a lot of the narratives that we see. You know, he's out there, he's talking about trade, he's talking about raising the minimum wage. He's already looked at his tax plan and said, you know, guys, I don't really like this so much. And he's gonna,
it's the Etch-a-Sketch moment.
yes. I think the Etch-a-Sketch is perfect. I mean, we're going to have, he's going to run his, you know, I hate to use the word maverick, but this is not going to be a traditional campaign, and I think he's going to take a lot of, he might run to the left of Hillary on some issues.
What about, what should we be looking for with the Republicans ahead of their convention? Like, what's the next big thing?
I think we look at, you know, as you're pointing out, a lot of people are falling in line behind Trump, but who are the holdouts? You know, obviously Paul Ryan said on Thursday that he's not yet ready to support Trump. I mean, how many more people are out there like that? How powerful and influential are they? I think that's probably the key thing to watch, whether there is really any signs of life in the, you know, kind of never Trump movement or stop Trump movement, which seems to really have been seriously diminished after Cruz and Kasich dropped out.
And, you know, you've got guys like Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska, who has been really, it's been pretty interesting to watch. He's been going out there on social media. He's doing tweet storms about how this is unacceptable. We can't have these two choices, basically hinting at a third-party run, right? So I think Trump is scheduled to meet with Paul Ryan on next Thursday. So I think if there's going to be any coalescing around a third-party movement, it's going to have to happen pretty quickly.
And what about on the Democratic side? What's ahead next? And Bernie says he's not dropping out yet at all. And I mean, are we going to keep having this fight back and forth before their convention, or is there something else we should be looking for?
That's, I think, what Trump has really masked in this election, right? There's a very fascinating story going on the Democratic side with Bernie Sanders and his huge popularity. And the fact is, most people just don't like Hillary Clinton. I think people on the left and right would admit that. So the schism in the Democratic Party is, I would argue, just as large as the one on the GOP side. So it'll be fascinating to see how long Bernie lasts. and what his impact will be on Hillary's presidential
And it'll be
hopes.
fascinating to see, assuming Bernie eventually exits and she wins the nomination, what the unification process is like for the Democratic Party. Is it as difficult as it is for the Republican Party? I mean, the Republican Party, ironically enough, is getting a head start on that right now with Trump being the presumptive nominee. So it'll be interesting to see how that process plays out on the Democratic side.
Great. Thank you guys for being with us. I appreciate it. And coming up, more doctors and dentists putting you under during routine procedures these days. But is the state making sure they're doing it right? Sedation safety, a KXAN investigation. Next on State of Texas In Depth. Welcome back to State of Texas In Depth. This spring, 14-month-old Daisy Lynn Torres died after a cavity filling at an Austin dental office. Her death is still under investigation. What we do know is Daisy Lynn was under anesthesia. We discovered more dentists these days are using sedation in their own offices. KXAN investigator Brian Collister found you may be at greater risk because of a lack of state inspections, little oversight, and few disciplinary actions against dentists when something goes wrong.
We would have been married 36 years the day Brian died. That was our anniversary.
Sharon Gill's husband, Brian, died after what should have been a simple procedure at this Bastrop dentist office in February 2014.
I kissed him goodbye and told him I loved him. And it's the last time I saw him alive. I'll never forget that.
Dr. Dan Holtzclaw pulled several of Brian's teeth and replaced them with implants, while Dr. Jacqueline Smith took over after the surgical procedure. But while under sedation, something went terribly wrong. Brian stopped breathing, went into cardiac arrest, and was rushed to the hospital. He died the next day.
You don't really know how much you're going to miss somebody until they're gone. And that's the hardest part.
Sharon filed a lawsuit against both dentists claiming they failed to properly monitor Brian's airway, heart rate, and respiration, which led to his death. Each dentist denies any wrongdoing. Neither would comment for our story, but in response to Sharon's suit, they claim Brian gave them an incomplete, inaccurate, and misleading past medical history. During Brian's visit, Holtzclaw used an IV with drugs fentanyl and Versed to sedate him. We checked, and he does have the required training and certification for that type of anesthesia.
They should have been monitoring better, and they did not.
Anesthesia complaints.
The job of monitoring dentists belongs to the Texas State Board of Dental Examiners. It has never disciplined Holtzclaw or Smith. But the board has received criticism for not protecting patients. A recent report by the Sunset Advisory Commission, the state's watchdog agency, says complications from dental procedures using anesthesia have caused serious harm to Texas patients, including death. Sunset's investigators found 112 complaints related to anesthesia since 2012, and this year is likely to hit a record high. Of those, 41 patients died. The report also says at least 13 of those cases included violations of the dental standard of care, including inappropriate preparation for or response to anesthesia-related emergencies. KXAN found the dental board is also not doing any inspections of dental offices where sedation is offered.
People are dying and being hurt while under anesthesia in dental offices. What is this agency doing to make sure the public is safe?
We are absolutely trying to do our best. We unfortunately have our hands tied to a certain extent. We need help. We need legislative help. We need the funds. We need the staff.
The state of Texas has a responsibility to protect the people of Texas, so that when they walk in for a procedure that is licensed and regulated by the state, that indeed it's done correctly.
Round Rock Representative Larry Gonzalez chairs the Sunset Commission and promises the legislature will find the money needed for inspections next session.
The people have a false sense of security right now about just how involved the state is in that protection and how we deliver it. This report helps us identify exactly what's wrong and then how to fix it.
I think clearly inspections are just one piece of that. It doesn't guarantee that it's going to be safe.
Dr. Tim Bittenbinder is president of the Texas Society of Anesthesiologists. He says most complications come from doctors not following proper procedures or not having sufficiently monitored patients.
There are some oral surgeons and some dentists that have gone through a great deal of training, and they provide safe care. There's no doubt about that. But if you're going to have folks that are undergoing deep sedation or general anesthesia, certainly I would argue that whoever is doing that monitoring be qualified to do it and be not distracted by being part of the procedure piece.
In Brian's case, it's not clear based on medical notes if someone was solely focused on monitoring him while he was under sedation.
I never imagined that could ever happen. I mean, you just don't. You just don't think it's going to happen.
Sharon is now sharing her husband's story to spare others the heartbreak she's going through.
I'm hoping that I can do something to not let this happen again. It just makes me so mad.
That was KXAN investigator Brian Collister reporting. We checked, there are 3 dentists in the Austin area in the last 5 years who the dental board has disciplined after their patients went to the hospital or died. All 3 are still practicing, but you can find out if your dentist has ever been disciplined for doing something wrong. Simply go to our website where we have a link to the dental board's website. Enter a dentist's name to check disciplinary history and also verify whether they have the proper training and certification to put you under. It's all in the investigative section of our website, kxan.com. We also found there are other ways you can protect yourself even after you get to a doctor's office if you plan to go under sedation. First, ask questions like, will someone other than the doctor be monitoring you? Do they have a written emergency plan? And be honest. Tell the doctor about all of your medical conditions and medications. Of course, you'll be following up with us as we approach the next legislative session. No doubt there will be talk about how to get funding for inspections soon. When we're back, the final word on Rick Perry and his new cozy relationship with Donald Trump. Next on State of Texas In Depth. This week, Texans immortalized their longest-serving governor at the state capitol. A portrait of Rick Perry now hangs proudly, but there's also something else still hanging out there. This one's on Perry's own website, one of his best-known speeches as a presidential candidate before he bowed out of the race. It's titled, "Defending Conservatism Against the Cancer of Trumpism." I quote, "Donald Trump is the modern-day incarnation of the know-nothing movement." That attack against the presumptive Republican presidential nominee was less than a year ago. Yet now, Perry is suddenly lining up behind Trump. Why? He says the party needs to come together and heal the wounds. A year ago, it was, "My fellow Republicans, don't take the poison." A poison Perry now says he won't rule out if Trump asked him to be his running mate. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas In Depth. Stay tuned for Meet the Press coming up at 9. I'm Josh Hinkle. Have a great day.